Well, this is the third installment of the Land and Water Use lectures for 2020. This one will be two separate PowerPoints, 5.3 and I believe 5.4. Both of them are about agriculture. So the objectives for 5.3 will be describe changes in agricultural practices, and you will have to describe from author's perspective and assumptions. The Green Revolution was a shift in agriculture away from small family-operated farms to large industrial. I'm going from 100 acres to 10,000 acres. There was increased use of mechanization, genetic modified organisms, irrigation, fertilizers, and pesticides. Generally increased the efficiency of use of the land. You got much more out of it. Short-term profitability and food supply. However, because of that, there was a decrease in world hunger and increase in Earth's carrying capacity, which led to the huge increase in the population. The negative consequences was because of all the tillage and stuff, there is a huge amount of soil erosion, biodiversity loss, because you're planting one crop. Ground is surface water contamination because of all the pesticides and so forth, but we'll talk about that. Mechanization basically is we increase the use of tractors and combines. The tractors for plowing and tilling, planting the crops and stuff. Combines for harvesting, increased yield. These increase the reliance on fossil fuels, which emitted more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, which increased climate change. Heavy machinery also impacted the soil, compacting it, making it so that there was less ability for the water to soak in. And it also made it so that it's more prone to erode either by water or by air. Some of the high yield crops are hybrids. Another type is genetically modified crops, and I'll explain what both of those are in a second. They produce a higher yield. In other words, an amount of crop per unit of area. Now, a hybrid is where you take two different species, cross-pollinate them so that you get the characteristics you want. It increases the yield and food stability in areas prone to famine. Now, with a hybrid, what happens is you take one parent, maybe disease resistant, or give you protein, or give you more seeds per corn cob, and you do it one which might not remove as much nitrogen from the soil. Now, what you do is you do like 10 rows of this, where the male one will be on the outer rows, and the number 1 and number 10 row, and the inner 8 will be the female. Now, all the females have the pollen removed, the male portion removed, and so the only thing that pollinates it will be the male portion. And that way, when they cross, you get a new critter. They grow this one up, and when they get the seeds off of it, those are the seeds for the next year. Now, with a genetically modified line, what they do is they take a gene. It can be from corn, it can be from bacteria, it can be from just about anything. And it will give them something like disease resistance, ability to not be infected by insects and stuff like that. They put that inside the corn, and now that corn has that disease resistance. Genetically modified crops have genes for drought resistance, pesticide resistance, faster growth, more proteins, more vitamins, increases profitability with fewer plants lost to drought, disease, pest. Plants may be larger and with higher yields per acre. However, if you can see here, once we put the gene in for resistance to this corn pest, we did not have a lot of this removed because it was basically resistance to those corn pests. They're genetically identical. Genetic diversity is decreased, and therefore, if there is a disease comes that wipes out this, all the corn is wiped out. Synthetic fertilizer has always been also been introduced. We're shifting away from manure and compost to synthetic fertilizers. Happened after World War II, after the nerve gases were found to be able to produce ammonia, nitrate, and phosphates. This increases yields and profits, where they will be able to use the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that is needed for production of amino acids, all the key elements for the plant to grow. However, excess nitrate and phosphates from the synthetic can be washed off the fields and go into nearby waters where they cause eutrophication. You can see that behind us, where the excess nitrogen, phosphorus causes excess algae. When the algae dies, it's going to be broken down by anaerobic bacteria, and it's basically going to remove all the oxygen from this area, causing a dead zone. These require fossil fuels for production, for making it, which releases CO2 for climate change. Irrigation, during where we draw water from ground or surface waters, and we bring it to the fields, and we basically just spray it on. Makes agricultural areas possible in what used to be a desert. However, it can deplete the groundwater sources. And the other thing that can happen is it can drown the roots. And this water that's coming down, when it dries, it leaves a salt behind. May not be much, but over years and years of doing this may develop to have so much salt. For example, in the San Joaquin Valley, there's areas where the salt level is so high, they can't grow any crops. We're adding synthetic pesticides and chemicals. We spray on the crops to kill the weeds, insects, rodents, and other pests that would otherwise eat the damage. This increases yield and profits. However, it can wash off, go and harm non-local, non-target species in the area. For example, the bees, kills them off. For example, in Catalina Island, what it did is it thinned the shells, made it so we lost all the bald eagles that were out there. Next unit is 5.4, Impact of Agricultural Practices, where we're going to describe a practice and indicate what the environmental damage is. And you're just going to describe environmental concepts and processes, and then go into how it causes the damages. For example, monocropping, where you only grow one crop, such as corn, wheat, and soil. It's highly efficient, because that way we only have to apply a certain pesticide and a certain amount and type of fertilizer depending on the crop. However, it's a monocrop, therefore it decreases biodiversity, and therefore if a new pest comes in, it's going to wipe it out. It increases soil erosion because they harvest all of this at once and leave the soil bare, leaving it open for water and wind erosion. It decreases the habitat diversity for species that live in the area because it may not like it. Tilling with the crops, it breaks up the soil to make planting easier, and it loosens the soil so that the roots can go down easier. However, it makes erosion, both wind and water, much easier. It also breaks up leftover roots that otherwise would hold it intact. Also makes it so that when we do this, there's less organic material for the soil, and therefore the old layer, the organic layer, is gone. The increased particulate matter in the air when we're tilling that can cause problems for water and people like me that have asthma. And so with no-till, they end up with a layer of plants on the surface year-round. Here, half the year, there's nothing on the surface. Slash and burn, making it so that we get rid of the rainforest so we can grow crops like corn. You cut down the vegetation, clear the land, make it, at that point in time, there's more nutrients in the soil. However, through time, there's not. Deforestation, you lose habitat, biodiversity, CO2 sequestration, loss of air pollution, loss of potential medical products. Vast majority of our medicines come from forests. Releases CO2, carbon, all of these greenhouse gases, which lead to global warming, and it decreases the amount of CO2 that goes back in. It increases particulate matter, which makes those of us with asthma prone to not liking it. It lowers the albedo, and making the area more likely to get warmer. For example, if we look, normal forest is green, which absorbs the light. Here, however, it reflects huge amounts of it. This, however, it absorbs it and just gets it hot. With synthetic or inorganic fertilizers, they don't bring the organic in, therefore there's no place to hold the water. There's no soil decomposers in there. It also leads to more leaching, causing the leaching of these fertilizers down, which can go into the groundwater and or off into the surface, causing, as we talked about before, contaminates groundwater, so that it gets down in the groundwater, so it's not good for us to drink. Causes eutrophication, where it can go down, leaching, or can run off, causing algae blooms. FRQ for one of these is, for example, explain one disadvantage of using inorganic commercial fertilizers, or explain one disadvantage of using GMOs. Explain one disadvantage of tilling. Could you answer any or all of those? Thank you.